I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who'd stand in a courtroom and watch her entire life get dissected by strangers. But there I was, sitting at a long wooden table, my hands folded so tightly my knuckles had gone white, listening to my husband, ex-husband, tell the judge exactly how worthless I was. His name was Graham. Graham Mitchell. We'd been married for 11 years. 11 years of building what I thought was a partnership, a life, a future. And in one afternoon, in front of a man in a black robe and a court stenographer who looked bored out of her mind, Graham stood there with his chest puffed out like a rooster and said the words that would haunt me forever. Your Honor, she will never touch my money again. The woman sitting next to him, her name was Sienna, smiled. Not a polite smile. Not even a smug smile. It was the kind of smile that said, I won. She leaned into Graham's shoulder like she'd earned the right to be there, like she hadn't spent the last 2 years sneaking around with a married man, and she whispered loud enough for me to hear, "That's right, darling." And my mother-in-law, Diane, oh, Diane. She sat in the gallery with her arms crossed, her lips pressed into a thin line of satisfaction, and she nodded. Actually, nodded star. Like she'd been waiting for this moment her whole life. Then she said, just loud enough to carry across the room, "She doesn't deserve a cent. If you've ever been betrayed, not just cheated on, but erased, you know exactly how I felt in that moment. Like I was invisible. Like everything I'd sacrificed, every year I'd spent supporting him, loving him, believing in him, had been rewritten into nothing. But here's the thing. They didn't know what was in that letter. And when the judge opened it, scanned the first few lines, and then started laughing, really laughing, the kind of laugh that made his shoulders shake, they realized too late that they'd underestimated me. This is the story of how I took back everything they tried to steal. Before I go any further, I need you to do me a favor. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt small, betrayed, or underestimated, drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. I want to know I'm not alone in this. And please, hit that subscribe button, because I've got more stories like this one, stories about people who fought back when the world tried to break them. Check the description box below. You'll find even more true revenge stories that'll keep you hooked. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. I met Graham when I was 26. I was working as a junior accountant at a mid-sized firm in Charlotte, North Carolina, and he was a consultant who came in to help restructure our department. He wasn't the most handsome man I'd ever seen. His hairline was already receding, and he had this nervous laugh that made him sound like a teenager, but he was smart star. God, he was smart. He could look at a spreadsheet and see patterns no one else noticed. He could walk into a meeting and command a room without raising his voice. And he noticed me. That was the part that hooked me. In a sea of people who treated me like furniture, Graham saw me. He asked my opinion on things. He stayed late to help me untangle a client's books when I was drowning in work. He brought me coffee, the good kind, not the break room sludge *, and remembered that I liked it with oat milk and a dash of cinnamon. 6 months later, we were engaged. Everyone said we were perfect together. His mother, Diane, threw us an engagement party at her country club, and I wore a pale blue dress I'd saved up for months to buy. I remember standing in that ballroom, surrounded by people I barely knew, feeling like I'd finally made it. Like I'd found the life I was supposed to have. We got married in the spring. It wasn't a huge wedding, just 75 people, mostly his family and co-workers, but it was beautiful. I walked down the aisle to a string quartet, and when Graham said his vows, his voice cracked. I thought it was because he loved me that much. Now I wonder if he was just nervous about lying in front of that many people. The first few years were good. I mean, they were fine star. We bought a house in a neighborhood with tree-lined streets and front porches, the kind of place where people waved at each other and kids rode bikes in the cul-de-sac. I kept working, but I also took care of everything at home. I cooked. I cleaned. I made sure his shirts were pressed and his mother got a birthday card every year, even though she never once thanked me. Graham's career took off. He started his own consulting firm, Mitchell & Associates, and I helped him build it from the ground up. I wasn't just his wife. I was his bookkeeper, his scheduler, his sounding board. I stayed up late with him, going over contracts and proposals, making sure every number added up. I believed in him. I believed in *us star. And then, somewhere around year 7, things started to shift. He worked later. He traveled more. He stopped asking about my day. When I tried to talk to him about something, anything, he'd look at me with this glazed expression, like I was background noise. I told myself it was stress. He was building something, and building things took sacrifice. But I started noticing little things. The way he'd angle his phone away from me when a text came in. The new cologne he wore, the one that smelled like cedar and something floral, something I'd never bought him. The receipts I'd find in his coat pockets, dinners at restaurants we'd never been to, flowers from shops I didn't recognize. I asked him once. Just once. "Graham, is everything okay? You seem distant." He looked at me like I'd insulted him. "I'm working, Claire. I'm building a business. If you can't handle that, maybe you should find something to do with your time instead of micromanaging me." I didn't ask again. By year 9, I knew. I didn't have proof, but I *knew star. You know how they say women have intuition? It's not magic. It's pattern recognition. It's noticing that your husband stops touching you, stops looking at you, stops pretending you exist unless he needs something. But I stayed. Why? Because I loved him. Because I'd invested a decade of my life into this marriage, into this man, and I didn't want to believe it was all for nothing. Because Diane, his mother, had made it very clear from day one that divorce was for quitters, and I didn't want to prove her right. And because, deep down, I thought maybe if I just loved him harder, if I just tried harder, he'd come back to me. I was so stupid. It wasn't until year 10, just last year, that I finally saw her. Sienna. She worked at his firm. She was 28, blonde, with legs that went on forever and a laugh that sounded like wind chimes. I met her at a company holiday party. Graham introduced us with this easy smile, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Claire, this is Sienna. She's been a huge help with the new client acquisition strategy." She shook my hand, looked me right in the eye, and said, "Graham talks about you all the time. You're so lucky to have such a dedicated husband." I wanted to throw my drink in her face. But I smiled. I said something polite. I played the role of the supportive wife, because that's what I'd been trained to do. And then, 6 months ago, I came home early from a dentist appointment and found them. Not in our bed, thank God, but in our living room. On our couch. The couch we'd picked out together at a furniture store in Raleigh, the one I'd spent 3 weekends researching to make sure we got the best deal. They were tangled together, her hands in his hair, his mouth on her neck, and they didn't even hear me come in. I stood there in the doorway, my keys still in my hand, and I watched them for 5 seconds. Maybe 10. Long enough to memorize every detail. The way his hand gripped her waist. The way she arched into him. The way they looked at each other like they were the only 2 people in the world. And then I cleared my throat. Graham jumped like he'd been electrocuted. Sienna scrambled to pull her blouse closed, her face going red, but she didn't look sorry. She looked annoyed star. Like I'd interrupted something important. "Claire," Graham started, but I held up my hand. "Don't." That's all I said. Just don't star. And then I turned around and walked out. I didn't cry. Not then. I drove to a Starbucks 3 miles away, sat in my car in the parking lot, and stared at the steering wheel until the sun went down. I felt hollow. Like someone had reached inside my chest and scooped out everything that mattered. When I finally went home, Graham was waiting for me. He didn't apologize. He didn't beg. He just said, "I think we both know this hasn't been working for a long time." And that was it. That was how my marriage ended. Not with a fight. Not with tears. Just with a sentence that made 11 years feel like nothing. He moved out 2 days later. Sienna helped him pack. And Diane? She called me the next week to tell me it was my fault. You let yourself go, Claire. You stopped trying. What did you expect? I expected loyalty. I expected honesty. I expected the man I loved to keep the promises he made. But I didn't say that. I just hung up. And I started planning. The weeks after Graham left were a blur. I went to work. I came home. I ate cereal for dinner because cooking for one felt like admitting defeat. I stopped answering calls from friends who wanted to check in because I knew what they really wanted. Asterisk details asterisk, drama, something they could discuss over brunch with their own husbands. I didn't have the energy to perform my tragedy for an audience. But here's what I asterisk did asterisk do. I started digging. Not in some melodramatic, hire a private investigator kind of way. I didn't need to. I'd spent 11 years managing Graham's calendar, organizing his files, keeping track of his business expenses. I knew where he kept his passwords. I knew which email accounts he used for what. And I knew, because I'd helped him set it up, that he was terrible at digital security. So one night, about 3 weeks after he moved out, I logged into his cloud storage. I'm not proud of it. Or maybe I am. I don't know anymore. All I know is that I was sitting at my kitchen table with a glass of wine I wasn't drinking, my laptop open in front of me, and I clicked through folders until I found one labeled asterisk personal, private star. The first thing I saw was photos. Hundreds of them. Graham and Sienna at restaurants, on weekend trips, at his office after hours. Some of them were dated back asterisk 3 years star. 3 years. I felt like I'd been punched. But I kept scrolling. There were emails. Long, detailed emails where they talked about me like I was an obstacle, a problem to be solved. In one, Sienna wrote, asterisk, how much longer do we have to pretend? I'm tired of sneaking around. You said you'd leave her by the end of the year. Asterisk. Graham's response, asterisk, I will. I just need to make sure the business is protected first. Claire's name is on some of the accounts, and I don't want her getting any ideas. Asterisk. Asterisk ideas. Asterisk. Like I was the villain in this story. I kept reading. I read about their plans to get married as soon as the divorce was finalized. I read about Sienna moving into asterisk our house asterisk, the house I'd decorated, the house where I'd imagined raising kids someday. I read about Diane helping them find a lawyer who specialized in minimizing spousal support obligations. And then I found something else. A financial document. A transfer agreement. Graham had been moving money. Not just pocket change. We're talking about significant sums, tens of thousands of dollars, out of our joint accounts and into accounts I didn't have access to. He'd been doing it slowly, carefully, over the course of 2 years. Small enough that I wouldn't notice if I wasn't looking for it, but big enough that by the time I did the math, I realized he'd siphoned off nearly $200,000. Money I'd helped him earn. Money asterisk would asterisk earn together, because I'd been the one keeping his books, managing his contracts, making sure his firm didn't implode while he was too busy building his empire to notice the cracks. And he'd stolen it. I sat there staring at the screen until my eyes burned, until the numbers blurred together, and I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks, asterisk rage star. Not sadness. Not heartbreak. Pure, white-hot rage. Graham thought he could erase me. He thought he could take everything we'd built and hand it to Sienna like it was a gift. He thought I'd just walk away, sign the papers, and disappear. He was wrong. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Her name was Monica Reeves, and she came highly recommended by a co-worker who'd gone through a brutal divorce 3 years earlier. Monica was in her 50s, with short silver hair and a handshake that could crack bones. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. Tell me everything, she said, pulling out a yellow legal pad. So I did. I told her about the affair. About the money. About the emails and the photos and the way Graham and Sienna talked about me like I was disposable. I told her about Diane's phone call, about the way they were all so confident I'd just roll over and let them win. Monica listened without interrupting. When I finished, She leaned back in her chair and tapped her pen against the pad. "Do you have copies of these documents?" she asked. "Every single one." She smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a shark spotting blood in the water. "Good. Then here's what we're going to do." Over the next 2 months, Monica and I built a case. We documented every transfer Graham had made. We printed out emails. We traced the money through 3 different accounts, all of which he'd opened without telling me. We found receipts for jewelry he'd bought Sienna, expensive pieces, the kind you don't buy for a casual fling. We even found text messages where he joked with his business partner about keeping Claire in the dark. But here's the thing, Graham didn't know I had any of this. He thought I was just going through the motions, signing whatever papers his lawyer sent over. He thought I'd be too hurt, too broken, to fight back. And honestly, I let him think that. When his lawyer reached out to schedule mediation, I agreed without protest. When they sent over a settlement offer that gave me basically nothing, a small share of the marital assets, no alimony, no claim to the business, I didn't argue. I just said I'd think about it. Monica told me to play along. "Let them get comfortable," she said. "Let them think they've already won. And then we'll hit them with everything." So that's what I did. I played the part of the defeated wife. I stopped posting on social media. I avoided mutual friends. I even sent Diane a polite text when she invited me to clear out any remaining items from Graham's childhood home, as if I'd ever stored anything there in the first place. And all the while, I was preparing. Monica drafted a response to Graham's settlement offer, *real* response, one that laid out exactly how much money he'd hidden, how long the affair had been going on, and how much of the business I was legally entitled to as his spouse and business partner star. She included copies of the emails, the financial records, everything. But we didn't send it. Not yet. We wait until the hearing, Monica said. We let them walk into that courtroom thinking they've got this in the bag. And then we hand it to the judge. I asked her if she thought it would work. She looked at me with those sharp, calculating eyes and said, "Claire, by the time we're done, Graham is going to wish he'd been honest from the start." The weeks leading up to the hearing were the longest of my life. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Graham's face, heard his voice saying, "I just need to make sure the business is protected first." I imagined him and Sienna laughing about me over dinner, toasting to their future with wine I'd probably paid for. But I also felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope star. Not hope that Graham would come back to me. God, no. I didn't want him anymore. I wanted him to pay star. I wanted him to feel the same helplessness, the same humiliation, the same gut-wrenching realization that everything he thought was solid could crumble in an instant. I wanted justice. And I was about to get it. 3 days before the hearing, Graham called me. I almost didn't answer. His name lit up my phone screen while I was standing in the cereal aisle at Target, holding a box of granola I didn't even want, and for a moment I just stared at it. I hadn't heard his voice in weeks, not since he'd moved out and left me with a half-empty closet and a mailbox full of legal documents. But curiosity got the better of me. "Hello, Claire." His voice was careful, too careful, like he was talking to a skittish animal. "How are you holding up?" I almost laughed. How was I holding up? Like he actually cared. Like he hadn't spent the last few months systematically dismantling our life together and handing the pieces to another woman. "What do you want, Graham?" A pause. I could hear him breathing, could picture him running his hand through his thinning hair the way he always did when he was nervous. "I just wanted to check in before the hearing," he said. "Make sure you're okay with everything." Okay with everything. Like this was a business transaction. Like he was asking if I approved of his quarterly projections. "I'm fine." "Good. That's good." Another pause. "Look, I know this has been hard on both of us." Don't what?" "Don't pretend this has been hard on you star." I kept my voice low, even though the woman sorting through cereal boxes 2 feet away from me was very clearly eavesdropping. You don't get to do that. Silence on the other end. Then, Claire, I didn't call to fight. I just want to make sure we can handle this like adults. The settlement we offered is fair. Fair. And I think if we just sign the papers and move on, we can both start fresh. No drama. No courtroom battles. Just clean. I closed my eyes, took a breath, reminded myself that Monica had told me to stay calm, to not give anything away. Sure, Graham. Whatever you say. He exhaled, like I'd just taken a weight off his shoulders. Thank you. Really. I think this is the best thing for both of us. Ham. I'll see you on Thursday, then. See you Thursday. I hung up before he could say anything else. The woman next to me glanced over, her eyes wide with sympathy. I gave her a tight smile, put the granola back on the shelf, and walked out of the store empty-handed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, analyzing every word, every pause. Graham thought he had me. He thought I was broken, compliant, ready to sign my life away just to avoid the mess of a public fight. And maybe, a few months ago, he would have been right. But not anymore. I got out of bed around 2 in the morning and made myself a cup of chamomile tea I didn't drink. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I used to grade Graham's business proposals, where we'd planned vacations and argued about paint colors, and I opened my laptop. I pulled up the folder Monica and I had been building. The emails. The bank statements. The photos. I scrolled through them one by one, not because I needed to review them, I had every detail memorized, but because I needed to feel it. The betrayal. The theft. The arrogance. I needed to remember why I was doing this. There was one email in particular that I kept coming back to. It was from Sienna to Graham, dated 8 months ago, right around the time I'd started noticing the distance between us. I can't wait until she's out of the picture. Then we can finally have the life we deserve. You're wasting your potential with her, babe. She doesn't see you the way I do. Graham's response, soon. I promise. I just need to be smart about it. I read it 3 times. 4. 5. And then I closed the laptop and went back to bed. The morning of the hearing, I woke up with a knot in my stomach that wouldn't go away. I spent an hour getting ready, longer than I usually would, because I wanted to look put together. Not like a woman who'd been falling apart for months, but like someone who had her life under control. I wore a navy blue dress, simple but professional, and the pearl earrings my grandmother had left me. I pulled my hair back into a low bun and kept my makeup minimal, a little concealer, some mascara, a neutral lip. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. I looked strong. Monica met me at the courthouse. She was wearing a charcoal pantsuit and carrying a leather briefcase that looked like it had seen 1,000 battles. When she saw me, she nodded approvingly. You ready? I think so. Good. Remember, stay calm. Don't react. Let me handle the talking. We walked into the building together, through the metal detectors and past the clusters of people waiting in the lobby. The air smelled like floor cleaner and stress. I could hear voices echoing off the marble walls, lawyers conferring with clients, families sitting on benches looking exhausted. And then I saw him. Graham. He was standing near the courtroom doors with his lawyer, a sharp-faced man in his 60s named Richard Novak. And next to Graham, of course, was Sienna. She was wearing a cream-colored blouse and a pencil skirt, her blonde hair falling in perfect waves over her shoulders. She had her hand on Graham's arm, and she was smiling. Actually smiling like this was a fun outing, like we were all here for a garden party instead of the legal dissolution of an 11-year marriage. When Graham saw me, his expression shifted. Just for a second, a flicker of something that might have been guilt, or maybe just surprise, but then it smoothed out into something neutral. polite. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. We just stood there, 10 feet apart, staring at each other like strangers. And then Diane showed up. She came sweeping in through the main doors like she owned the place, her designer handbag swinging from her arm, her hair freshly blown out. She walked straight to Graham, kissed him on the cheek, and then turned to look at me. Her eyes were cold. "Claire." She didn't say it like a greeting. She said it like an accusation. I didn't respond. I just turned to Monica and said, "Let's go inside." The courtroom was smaller than I expected. There was a judge's bench at the front, a witness stand to the side, and 2 tables facing the bench, one for us, one for them. The walls were wood-paneled, the lighting fluorescent and harsh. Everything about it felt sterile, impersonal, like a place where lives were dissected and reassembled without any regard for the people attached to them. Monica and I took our seats at the left table. Graham, Richard, and, God help me, Sienna took the right. Diane sat in the gallery behind them, her arms crossed, her face set in a mask of smug satisfaction. The judge entered a few minutes later. His name was Judge Raymond Caulfield, and he looked exactly like you'd expect a family court judge to look. Mid-60s, graying hair, wire-rimmed glasses, an expression that said he'd seen every flavor of human misery and wasn't impressed by any of it. He sat down, shuffled some papers, and looked up. "All right. Let's get started." Richard Novak stood first. He was smooth, polished, the kind of lawyer who probably charged $500 an hour and earned every penny. He laid out Graham's position with the kind of confidence that made it sound like the only reasonable option. "Your Honor, my client, Mr. Mitchell, is seeking a straightforward dissolution of marriage. The parties have been separated for several months, and Mr. Mitchell has made a fair and generous offer to Ms. Harper." "Ms. Mitchell," I said quietly. Richard paused. "I'm sorry." "It's still Ms. Mitchell I said, louder this time. "We're not divorced yet." Judge Caulfield glanced at me over his glasses, then back at Richard. "Continue." Richard cleared his throat. "As I was saying, Mr. Mitchell has offered a settlement that includes a fair division of marital assets. Ms. Mitchell will receive a portion of the equity from the marital home, as well as a modest lump sum. Mr. Mitchell will retain full ownership of his business, Mitchell and Associates, as it was established prior to the marriage and is considered separate property." That was a lie. But I kept my face neutral. "Mr. Mitchell is a successful consultant," Richard continued, "and has worked incredibly hard to build his firm. He's asking the court to recognize that his business success is due to his own efforts, and that Ms. Mitchell, while a supportive spouse, is not entitled to a share of the business itself." He sat down. Monica stood. "Your Honor," she said, her voice calm but firm, "my client contests nearly every aspect of Mr. Mitchell's proposal." Graham shifted in his seat. I saw his jaw tighten. "Ms. Mitchell is not simply a supportive spouse," Monica continued. "She was an integral part of building Mitchell and Associates. She managed the firm's finances, handled client accounts, and worked unpaid for years to help establish the business. Claiming that the business is separate property is not only inaccurate, it's insulting." Richard opened his mouth to object, but Monica kept going. "Furthermore, my client has evidence that Mr. Mitchell has been systematically hiding marital assets. Over the course of the last 2 years, he transferred over $200,000 from joint accounts into accounts held solely in his name. This is not speculation. This is documented fact." Graham's face went pale. "We have bank records, emails, and financial statements that prove Mr. Mitchell has been planning this divorce for years, and that he has been intentionally defrauding my client in order to minimize her settlement." Judge Caulfield's expression didn't change, but I saw his eyes sharpen. "Do you have these documents?" "We do, Your Honor, and would like to submit them as evidence." Monica pulled a thick folder from her briefcase and handed it to the bailiff, who passed it up to the judge. Graham leaned over to Richard, whispering something urgent. Sienna's smile had vanished. Diane's face had gone stiff. And I just sat there, my hands folded in my lap, waiting. This was it. Judge Caulfield opened the folder Monica had handed him. He pulled out the first document, a bank statement, and scanned it. Then the second. Then the third. His expression didn't change, but I could see the wheels turning behind those wire-rimmed glasses. He was a man who'd spent decades sorting through lies, and he knew exactly what he was looking at. Richard Novak was on his feet again, his voice tight. Your Honor, these allegations are... I'll review the evidence, Mr. Novak, Judge Caulfield said, not looking up. Sit down. Richard Saturday. The room was silent except for the sound of pages turning. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, could feel the weight of Graham's stare boring into the side of my head. But I didn't look at him. I kept my eyes on the judge. After what felt like an eternity, Judge Caulfield set the folder down and looked at Richard. Mr. Novak, your client has transferred substantial sums of money out of joint accounts over a period of 2 years. Can you explain that? Richard straightened his tie. Your Honor, my client is a businessman. He makes financial decisions in the course of running his firm. These weren't business accounts, Monica interjected. These were * joint personal accounts star. Money that belonged to both parties. My client was protecting his assets. From his * wife *. Monica's voice was sharp now. Your Honor, this is textbook dissipation of marital assets. Mr. Mitchell knew he was planning a divorce, and he took steps to ensure that Ms. Mitchell would have no access to the money she helped him earn. Graham was whispering urgently to Richard now, his face flushed. Sienna had gone very still, her hands clasped in her lap. And Diane looked like someone had just told her the country club was closing. Judge Caulfield held up a hand. I'm going to need a moment to review this more thoroughly. He glanced at the clock. We'll take a 15-minute recess. He stood, and everyone in the room stood with him. The bailiff called, all rise, even though we already were, and then the judge disappeared through a door behind the bench. The second he was gone, Graham turned to me. What the hell do you think you're doing? I didn't answer. Monica put a hand on my arm, a silent reminder to stay quiet. Claire. His voice was louder now, almost desperate. This is insane. You're making this so much harder than it needs to be. Mr. Mitchell, Monica said coolly, I'd advise you not to speak to my client. He ignored her. You know how much I've worked for this. You know what that business means to me. And you know how much *I* worked for it, I said, my voice quiet but steady. You know exactly what I gave up to help you build it. You didn't build it, Sienna said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. She was standing now, her arms crossed, her pretty face twisted into something ugly. You didn't build anything, Claire. You just existed. Graham did all the real work. You were just... Sienna. Graham's voice was sharp. Not now. But she wasn't listening. No, I'm tired of everyone acting like she's some kind of saint. She didn't contribute anything meaningful. She was just there, riding his coattails, and now she wants to take half of everything he earned. That's enough, Richard snapped. Sienna's mouth snapped shut, but her eyes were still blazing. Monica leaned close to me and whispered, Don't react. Let her dig her own grave. I nodded. But inside, I was shaking. When Judge Caulfield came back, the room fell silent again. He sat down, adjusted his glasses, and looked at both tables. All right. I've reviewed the initial evidence, and I have some concerns. Mr. Novak, your client's financial behavior raises serious questions about his intent and his credibility. Richard opened his mouth, but Judge Caulfield kept talking. However, before I make any rulings, I want to hear from both parties directly. Ms. Mitchell, do you have anything you'd like to add? Monica stood. Your Honor, my client has prepared a statement. With your permission, we'd like to submit it to the court. Judge Caulfield gestured. Go ahead. Monica reached into her briefcase and pulled out an envelope. A plain white envelope, sealed, with my name written on the front in my own handwriting. She walked it up to the bench and handed it to the judge. This was the part I'd been waiting for. Inside that envelope was a letter. 3 pages, single-spaced, written over the course of 2 sleepless nights. It wasn't just a legal document. It was everything I'd been holding in for months, maybe years. Every hurt, every betrayal, every moment I'd been made to feel small. But it was also strategic. Monica and I had crafted it carefully. It wasn't emotional ranting. It was a clear, methodical account of Graham's behavior, his lies, his theft. It included dates, names, amounts. It referenced the emails, the transfers, the affair. And it ended with a request that the court not only grant me a fair share of the marital assets, but also hold Graham accountable for fraud. But here's the thing, I'd also included something else. Something Monica had initially hesitated on, but eventually agreed was worth the risk. I'd included a timeline. A detailed, date-by-date breakdown of Graham's affair with Sienna. Where they'd met. When it had started. How long it had been going on. And, most importantly, how much * company money * Graham had spent on her. Dinners. Trips. Jewelry. Hotel rooms. All of it paid for with funds from Mitchell and Associates. Funds that were supposed to be business expenses. Which meant Graham hadn't just stolen from me. He'd committed tax fraud. Judge Caulfield opened the envelope and pulled out the letter. He started reading. I watched his face. At first, his expression was neutral. Professional. The same look he'd had all morning. The practiced mask of a man who'd seen every version of marital warfare and wasn't surprised by anything anymore. But then something shifted. His eyebrows rose. Just slightly. He leaned forward in his chair, his eyes moving faster across the page. And then, God, I'll never forget this, his mouth twitched. Not a smile. Not yet. Just a twitch. He flipped to the second page, and I saw his jaw tighten like he was trying to hold something back. By the time he got to the third page, his shoulders were shaking. And then he laughed. Not a polite chuckle. Not a restrained courtroom laugh. A real, genuine, belly-deep laugh that echoed off the wood-paneled walls and made everyone in the room freeze. Graham's face drained of color. Sienna's eyes went wide. Diane sat forward in her seat, her mouth opening like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Richard Novak looked like he'd just watched his entire case spontaneously combust. Judge Caulfield kept reading, his shoulders still shaking, and when he finally finished, he set the letter down and took off his glasses. He rubbed his eyes like he was trying to compose himself, and when he looked up, there was something in his expression that almost looked like respect. Ms. Mitchell, he said, his voice still a little unsteady. This is very thorough. Thank you, Your Honor, I said quietly. He turned to Graham, and his expression hardened. Mr. Mitchell, according to this letter, and the supporting documentation I've just reviewed, you've been engaged in an extramarital affair for approximately 3 years. Is that correct? Graham opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Richard, who was frantically scribbling notes like that would somehow save him. Your Honor, my client's personal life is relevant when it involves the misuse of marital and business assets, Judge Caulfield said, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. Mr. Mitchell, I'm going to ask you again. Have you been in a relationship with, he glanced at the letter, Ms. Sienna Cortez for the past 3 years? The silence was suffocating. Finally, Graham nodded. Yes. And during that time, did you use funds from your business to pay for expenses related to this relationship? Another pause. Some expenses, yes. How much? I don't know the exact amount. According to Ms. Mitchell's records, you spent over $85,000 on personal expenses that were categorized as business write-offs. Judge Caulfield's voice was deadly calm now. Hotel rooms in Charleston. Dinners in Asheville. A weekend trip to Miami. Jewelry from Tiffany & Company. All of it charged to company accounts and claimed as business expenses on your tax returns. Graham looked like he was going to be sick. Your Honor, Richard said, standing quickly, my client may have made some accounting errors, but… Mr. Novak, your client didn't make errors. He committed fraud. Judge Caulfield picked up the letter again, skimmed a section, and then looked back at Graham. And according to this timeline, you began transferring money out of joint accounts approximately 2 weeks after Ms. Cortez was hired at your firm. Which suggests this wasn't a spontaneous decision, it was premeditated. I watched Graham's hands clench into fists on the table. Your Honor, we'd like to request a continuance to review. Denied. Judge Caulfield set the letter down and folded his hands. Mr. Mitchell, here's what's going to happen. I'm ordering an immediate freeze on all business and personal accounts associated with you until we can conduct a full audit. I'm also referring this case to the IRS for investigation into potential tax fraud. Graham's head snapped up. What? You heard me. If you've been writing off personal expenses as business deductions, that's a federal crime. And given the amount of money involved, I imagine they're going to be very interested in having a conversation with you. Sienna made a small, strangled sound. Diane's face had gone grey. Furthermore, Judge Caulfield continued, I'm granting Ms. Mitchell's request for a full accounting of all marital assets, including the business. We're going to go through every account, every transaction, every penny, and we're going to figure out exactly how much you've hidden from your wife. He looked at me, and for the first time since I'd walked into that courtroom, I saw something that almost looked like approval. Ms. Mitchell, I'm also granting you temporary spousal support, effective immediately, and I'm ordering your husband to vacate the marital home until this case is resolved. Your Honor, Graham started, but Judge Caulfield held up a hand. I'm not finished. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to something quiet but laced with steel. Mr. Mitchell, I've been doing this job for 23 years. I've seen a lot of people try to cheat their spouses out of what they're owed. But I have to say, the sheer arrogance of walking into my courtroom with your mistress and your mother, acting like you've already won, while your wife has a 3-page receipt of every lie you've told. That's a new one. He picked up the letter one more time and shook his head, and I swear to God, he was smiling. Oh, this is good, he said, almost to himself. Then, louder, Mr. Mitchell, you and your attorney are going to provide Ms. Mitchell's counsel with full financial disclosure within 30 days. If you fail to comply, I'll hold you in contempt. Are we clear? Graham didn't answer. He just stared at the table, his face ashen. I said, are we clear? Yes, Graham whispered. Good. We'll reconvene in 6 weeks for a full hearing. Until then, Ms. Mitchell retains possession of the marital home, and Mr. Mitchell is prohibited from making any further transfers or withdrawals from joint accounts. Court is adjourned. He banged the gavel, stood, and walked out. And just like that, it was over. For a moment, no one moved. Then Richard started shoving papers into his briefcase, his face red, his movements jerky. Graham just sat there, staring at nothing, like his brain was trying to process what had just happened. Sienna was whispering something urgent to him, her hand on his arm, but he wasn't responding. And Diane stood up, her purse clutched to her chest, and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Fear. Monica touched my elbow. Let's go. I stood, my legs shaky, and followed her out of the courtroom. Behind us, I heard Sienna's voice, shrill and panicked. Graham, what does this mean? What's going to happen? I didn't hear his answer. I didn't need to. We made it halfway down the courthouse steps before I stopped, braced myself against the railing, and started crying. Not sad crying. Not broken crying. Relief. Monica stood beside me, one hand on my shoulder, and didn't say anything. She just let me shake, let me gasp for air, let me release every ounce of tension I'd been holding in for months. When I finally caught my breath, I looked up at her. Did that really just happen? She smiled. It really just happened. The judge asterisk laughed star. He did. And Graham's face was priceless, Monica finished. Claire, you just won. Not the war, not yet. But you won the battle. And you scared the hell out of him in the process. I wiped my eyes, smudging my mascara, and let out a shaky laugh. I can't believe it worked. It worked because you were prepared. And because you didn't let them intimidate you. She squeezed my shoulder. You did good. I nodded, still trying to process everything. The letter. The judge's reaction. Graham's face. The way the entire room had shifted in the span of 10 minutes. I'd gone in there expecting a fight. I hadn't expected to win. That night, I sat in my kitchen, because it was mine again, at least for now, and opened a bottle of wine. I poured myself a glass, took a sip, and then pulled out my phone. I had 17 text messages. 6 from friends who'd somehow already heard about what happened. 3 from my mom, who I'd been avoiding because I didn't want to explain everything until it was over. And 1 from a number I didn't recognize. I opened it. This isn't over. You think you're so smart, but you just made everything worse. Sienna. I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it. She was right about one thing. It wasn't over. But I'd already proven I wasn't the person they thought I was. And I was just getting started. If you're still with me, drop a comment and let me know what you think. Have you ever had to fight for what's yours? Have you ever watched someone underestimate you and lived to see the regret on their face? I want to hear your stories. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. I've got more stories like this, and I promise they only get better. Check the description box below for even more true revenge tales that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. Now, let me tell you what happened next. The first thing I did after leaving the courthouse was go home and lock the door. Not because I was afraid, though maybe I should have been, given Sienna's text, but because I needed to breathe star. I needed to stand in the middle of my living room and let the reality of what had just happened sink in. Graham was gone. Ordered out of the house. The accounts were frozen. The IRS was going to come knocking. And Judge Caulfield had looked at my letter and laughed star. I sank onto the couch, our couch, the one I'd caught them on, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could actually fill my lungs all the way. But the relief didn't last long. Because within 24 hours, the calls started. The first one came from Diane. I was at work, sitting at my desk pretending to review a client file, when my phone buzzed. I saw her name on the screen and almost didn't answer. But curiosity, or maybe masochism, got the better of me. Hello. How dare you? Her voice was like ice, sharp and brittle and furious. Diane. Don't you dare say my name like we're friends. What you did yesterday was disgusting. You humiliated my son in front of a judge, in front of everyone and for what? Money. Is that all you care about? I closed my eyes and counted to 3. I care about being treated fairly. Fairly. She let out a harsh laugh. You were treated more than fairly, Claire. Graham gave you everything. A home. A life. Stability. And this is how you repay him? By dragging him through court like a criminal. He is a criminal, I said, my voice quiet but firm. He stole from me. He committed fraud. He made mistakes. He made choices, I interrupted. Calculated, deliberate choices. And now he's facing the consequences. Silence on the other end. Then, you're going to regret this. Maybe. But I doubt it. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking. The second call came 2 days later, from a number I didn't recognize. I answered it on my lunch break, sitting in my car in the parking lot outside a Panera. Ms. Mitchell. Yes. This is Agent Darren Walsh with the IRS Criminal Investigations Division. My stomach dropped. I'm calling regarding your ex-husband, Graham Mitchell, and his business, Mitchell and Associates. We've received a referral from Judge Caulfield and would like to schedule an interview with you at your earliest convenience. I blinked. An interview? Yes. We understand you have documentation related to potential tax fraud and would like to review it with you. This is purely voluntary at this stage, but your cooperation would be greatly appreciated. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. When did you want to meet? Would Monday work for you? It was Thursday. Monday's fine. Great. I'll send you an email with the details. Thank you for your time, Ms. Mitchell. He hung up. I sat there in my car, staring at the phone, trying to process what had just happened. The IRS was getting involved. Asterisk the IRS star. I'd thought Monica was exaggerating when she'd said Graham could face federal charges, but apparently she hadn't been. Graham was in real trouble. And I was the one who'd put him there. The guilt hit me that night. Not guilt for what I'd done. I didn't regret exposing him, didn't regret fighting back, but guilt for how it felt star. Because part of me, a part one didn't want to acknowledge, was enjoying this. I was enjoying watching Graham squirm, watching his perfect life crumble, watching him realize that I wasn't the soft, pliable woman he thought he'd married. I hated that I enjoyed it. But I couldn't stop. Monica called me that evening to check in. How are you holding up? I don't know, I admitted. The IRS called. I figured they would. Is that bad? For Graham, I mean. Depends on what they find. If he's been writing off personal expenses the way we think he has, yeah, it's bad. Tax fraud is a felony, Claire. He could be looking at fines, penalties, maybe even jail time. Jail time. I'd never thought it would go that far. Does that bother you? Monica asked, her voice gentle. I don't know, I said again. Should it? Not if he did what we think he did. He made his choices. You're just holding him accountable. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. What happens next? We wait for the audit results. In the meantime, you've got spousal support coming in, and he's not allowed to touch the joint accounts. You're in a good position, Claire. Just stay the course. Okay. And Claire. Yeah. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for standing up for yourself. Not Diane. Not Graham. Not anyone. I'll try. But it was hard. Because over the next 2 weeks, the pressure kept building. Graham started texting me. Not angry texts, desperate ones. Claire, please. We need to talk. This has gone too far. Can we just sit down and figure this out? I know I messed up, but you're ruining my life. I didn't respond to any of them. Sienna tried calling me 3 times. I blocked her number. Diane sent me a letter, an actual, handwritten letter, telling me I was destroying her family and that she'd never forgive me. I threw it away without finishing it. And through it all, I kept going to work. Kept paying bills. Kept living in the house that was supposed to be hours but now felt like a museum of a life that had never really existed. I was lonely. God, I was lonely. But I was also free. For the first time in years, I wasn't performing for anyone. I wasn't trying to be the perfect wife, the supportive partner, the woman who held everything together while her husband dismantled their life. I was just me. And that was terrifying. But it was also exhilarating. The meeting with the IRS agent happened on a Monday morning at a bland office building in downtown Charlotte. Agent Walsh was younger than I expected, maybe early 40s, with dark hair going grey at the temples and a handshake that was firm but not intimidating. He led me into a windowless conference room and gestured to a chair. "Thank you for coming in, Ms. Mitchell." "Of course." He opened a laptop and pulled out a legal pad. "I want to start by saying that you're not in any trouble here. We're just trying to get a clear picture of your ex-husband's financial activities." "Okay." "You submitted documentation to the court indicating that Mr. Mitchell used business funds for personal expenses. Can you walk me through that?" So I did. I told him about the receipts I'd found. The dinners, the trips, the jewelry. I showed him the emails where Graham had joked about creative accounting. I explained how he'd set up separate accounts to funnel money away from me, and how he'd been doing it for years. Agent Walsh took notes the entire time, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he looked up. "Ms. Mitchell, how long were you involved in the financial management of your husband's business?" "Almost the entire time he ran it. I handled the bookkeeping for the first 6 years, and even after he hired an accountant, I still reviewed the statements." "So you'd say you have a comprehensive understanding of his business finances?" "Yes." He nodded slowly. "And to the best of your knowledge, has Mr. Mitchell filed accurate tax returns during that time?" I hesitated. This was the line I'd been walking, providing information without incriminating myself, without making it look like I'd been complicit. "I can't say for certain," I said carefully. "But based on what I've seen, I think there are discrepancies." "Discrepancies," he repeated, writing it down. "Yes." "Okay. We'll need to review his returns and compare them to the documentation you've provided. If we find evidence of fraud, we'll move forward with an investigation." He closed the laptop. "Is there anything else you think we should know?" I thought about it. About all the late nights, the hushed phone calls, the way Graham had always insisted on handling the taxes himself after that first audit scare 7 years ago. "He was paranoid about audits," I said. "He used to say that the IRS was always looking for a reason to go after small business owners. He was very careful. Or at least, he thought he was." Agent Walsh smiled, just slightly. "Thank you. That's helpful." When I left the building, I felt like I'd just run a marathon. I sat in my car, hands on the steering wheel, and tried to steady my breathing. This was real. This was actually happening. Graham wasn't just going to lose money, he was going to lose everything. His business. His reputation. Maybe his freedom. And I was the one who'd set it all in motion. My phone buzzed. A text from Monica. Asterisk, how'd it go? Asterisk. I typed back, asterisk, he's in trouble. Real trouble. Asterisk. Asterisk, good. He deserves it. Asterisk. I stared at those words for a long time. Did he? Did anyone deserve this? But then I thought about the courtroom. The way he'd looked at me like I was nothing. The way Sienna had smiled. The way Diane had said I didn't deserve a cent. And I thought, asterisk, yes. Yes, he does. Asterisk. 3 weeks after the IRS meeting, Graham's lawyer requested an emergency hearing. Monica called me on a Tuesday afternoon, her voice crackling with barely contained amusement. "You're not going to believe this." "What?" Richard Novak just filed a motion to reconsider the asset freeze. Apparently, Graham's business is suffering irreparable harm because he can't access his accounts. I frowned. Can he do that? Can he get the freeze lifted? He can try. But given what the IRS has found so far, I doubt Judge Caulfield is going to be sympathetic. What did they find? Monica paused. Officially, I don't know. But unofficially, let's just say Agent Walsh called me yesterday and used the phrase significantly underreported income. My heart skipped. How significant? Claire, I think your ex-husband has been dodging taxes for at least 5 years. Maybe longer. I sat down heavily on my couch. Jesus. Yeah. So when we go back to court next week, I want you to be prepared. Graham's going to be desperate. And desperate people do stupid things. She wasn't wrong. The hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday at 10 a.m. I wore the same navy dress I'd worn before, it felt like armor now, and met Monica outside the courthouse. The morning was cold, the sky gray and threatening rain, and I wrapped my coat tighter around myself as we walked up the steps. Inside, the hallways were crowded with the usual chaos of family court, crying children, arguing couples, lawyers conferring in hushed tones. We made our way to courtroom 3B and pushed through the heavy wooden doors. Graham was already there. But he looked different. The confident, polished man who'd stood in this same room 3 weeks ago was gone. In his place was someone haggard, someone who looked like he hadn't slept in days. His suit was wrinkled. His tie was crooked. And when he looked at me, there was something in his eyes that might have been desperation. Or hatred. I couldn't tell. Sienna wasn't with him this time. Neither was Diane. It was just Graham and Richard Novak, sitting at their table in silence. Judge Caulfield entered, and we all stood. "Be seated," he said, settling into his chair. He looked at Richard. "Mr. Novak, you requested this hearing. Let's hear it." Richard stood, smoothing his tie. He looked tired too. "Your Honor, my client is facing significant financial hardship as a result of the asset freeze you imposed. His business, Mitchell and Associates, has been unable to pay vendors, meet payroll, or fulfill existing contracts. Without access to his accounts, Mr. Mitchell is at risk of losing everything he's built over the last 15 years. He paused, letting that sink in. "We're not asking you to lift the freeze entirely," Richard continued. "But we are requesting a limited release of funds so that Mr. Mitchell can keep his business operational while we work through the financial discovery process." Judge Caulfield looked at Monica. "Ms. Reeves." Monica stood. "Your Honor, Mr. Mitchell's so-called financial hardship is entirely self-inflicted. He spent years hiding assets, transferring money, and committing fraud. The fact that his business is now suffering is a direct result of his own criminal behavior." Richard bristled. "Your Honor, my client hasn't been convicted of anything yet," Monica said calmly. "But the IRS is currently investigating him for tax fraud. And until that investigation is complete, my client has every right to expect that the marital assets, their assets, remain protected." Judge Caulfield leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "Mr. Novak, has your client provided full financial disclosure yet?" Richard hesitated. "We're working on it, Your Honor." "That's not an answer. We've provided some documentation, but—" "Some," Monica interjected. "Your Honor, it's been 3 weeks, and we've received exactly 2 bank statements and a partial tax return from 2021. Mr. Mitchell is clearly stalling." "Your Honor, my client has been cooperating." "No, he hasn't," I said. Everyone turned to look at me. Judge Caulfield raised an eyebrow. "Ms. Mitchell, do you have something to add?" Monica gave me a look that said *be careful*, but I couldn't stop myself. "He hasn't been cooperating," I said, louder now. "He's been hiding things. He always has. And now he's trying to make it sound like I'm the problem because he can't access the money he stole from me." "Your Honor," Richard started, but Judge Caulfield held up a hand. "Ms. Mitchell, I appreciate your input, but let your attorney speak for you." I nodded, my face hot. "Yes, Your Honor. I'm sorry." But I wasn't. And from the look on Graham's face, he knew it. Judge Caulfield turned back to Richard. "Mr. Novak, here's what's going to happen. Your client has 2 more weeks to provide complete financial disclosure. If he fails to do so, I will not only keep the asset freeze in place, I'll hold him in contempt of court. Are we clear?" Richard's jaw tightened. "Yes, Your Honor." "As for the limited release of funds, I'll allow it, but only for legitimate business expenses, and only with prior approval from Ms. Mitchell's counsel. Every transaction will be documented and reviewed." He banged his gavel. We're adjourned. As we filed out of the courtroom, Graham caught up to me in the hallway. Claire, wait. I kept walking. Monica was at my side, her hand on my elbow, but Graham stepped in front of us, blocking our path. Claire, please. Just talk to me for 1 second. Mr. Mitchell, Monica said sharply, you need to step back. I'm not trying to. He ran a hand through his hair, and I saw how much weight he'd lost, how grey his skin looked. Claire, I'm begging you. If you keep pushing this, I'm going to lose everything. The business, the house, all of it. Is that really what you want? I stared at him. At this man I'd loved for 11 years, this man who'd promised to build a life with me, who'd stood in front of our friends and family and vowed to honor me. And I felt nothing. No pity. No love. Not even anger anymore. Just exhaustion. You already lost everything, I said quietly. You just didn't realize it until now. His face crumpled. Claire. Goodbye, Graham. Monica steered me past him, and we walked out of the courthouse into the cold morning air. That night, Monica called me. The IRS audit results came back. I sat up straighter on my couch. And Graham underreported his income by over $400,000 over the last 5 years. He's facing penalties, back taxes, and possible criminal charges. I closed my eyes. $400,000. Yeah. Agent Walsh said they're building a case. It's not official yet, but Claire, Graham's going to prison. The words hung in the air. Are you okay? Monica asked. Was I? I didn't know. Part of me felt vindicated. He'd done this to himself, after all. But another part of me felt sad. Not for him. For the life we could have had, if he'd just been honest. If he'd just been good star. I will be, I said finally. Good. Because we're not done yet. What do you mean? The financial discovery came back. And Claire, he's been hiding even more than we thought. There are offshore accounts. Real estate holdings he never disclosed. We're talking millions. Millions. How did he even? I don't know. But we're going to find out. And we're going to make sure you get every penny you're owed. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Okay. Get some rest. We've got a long road ahead. She hung up. I sat there in the dark, staring at nothing, and tried to figure out how I felt. Triumphant. Guilty. Relieved. All of it. None of it. I just felt tired. But I also felt something else. Alive. For the first time in years, I felt like I was the one in control of my story. And I wasn't done writing it yet. The offshore accounts changed everything. When Monica first told me about them, I thought she was exaggerating. But when she showed up at my house 3 days later with a leather portfolio full of documents, I realized she wasn't. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd once helped Graham draft business proposals, and she spread out the papers like evidence at a crime scene. This, she said, tapping a document, is an account in the Cayman Islands. Opened 4 years ago. Balance, $1.2 million. I stared at the number. I don't understand. How did he even? And this, she continued, pulling out another sheet, is a property deed for a condo in Charleston. Purchased 2 years ago. Valued at $650,000. Also in his name only. Charleston, I repeated numbly. We went to Charleston for our anniversary 2 years ago. Monica nodded. I know. According to the records, he bought it 3 weeks before that trip. Want to guess who he listed as an occupant? I didn't need to guess. Sienna. Bingo. I felt like I was going to be sick. There's more, Monica said gently. A yacht. registered in Florida, another offshore account in Switzerland, a timeshare in Colorado. Claire, your husband has been building a completely separate financial life for years, and he's been using marital funds to do it. I couldn't speak. I just sat there, staring at the documents, trying to comprehend the scope of what Graham had done. He hadn't just cheated on me. He hadn't just stolen from me. He'd been planning to erase me for years. How much? I finally asked, my voice hoarse. Total. How much are we talking about? Monica pulled out a calculator and started adding numbers. When she finished, she looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Conservatively, $3.7 million. The room tilted. Claire. Monica's voice sounded far away. Claire, breathe. I tried. I put my head between my knees and gulped air until the dizziness passed. $3.7 million. Enough to retire. Enough to never work again. Enough to live a completely different life. And Graham had hidden it all while I'd been clipping coupons and worrying about whether we could afford to fix the dishwasher. I'm going to destroy him, I said, my voice low and steady. Monica smiled. Yes, you are. We filed an amended petition the next day. In it, we laid out every account, every property, every hidden asset. We included transaction records showing how Graham had used our joint accounts to fund his secret empire. We attached emails where he'd instructed his financial advisor to keep everything offshore and off the radar. And we demanded full restitution. Not half. Not a fair share. Everything. Because technically, all of it had been purchased with marital funds. Which meant legally, I was entitled to half of every single asset Graham had hidden. Monica hand-delivered the petition to Richard Novak's office on a Tuesday afternoon. She told me later that when he opened it, his face went white. He actually said, "Oh my God," Monica recounted, barely suppressing a grin. Like, out loud. "Oh my God star. What did you say?" I said, "See you in court." The next hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later, but Graham didn't wait that long to respond. He showed up at my door on a Saturday morning. I was in my pajamas, drinking coffee and scrolling through emails when the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw him standing there, unshaven and disheveled, his hands shoved in his coat pockets. I considered not answering, but curiosity won out. I opened the door but didn't unlock the screen. "What do you want? Can I come in?" "No." He flinched. "Claire, please. I need to talk to you." "Then talk." He glanced around, like he was afraid the neighbors were watching. Maybe they were. Not out here. "I don't care where you want to talk, Graham. You have 60 seconds. Start talking." He took a breath, and when he spoke, his voice was shaking. "I'm sorry." "Okay. I'm sorry star. I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you. But you're taking this too far." "Too far?" I almost laughed. "You hid millions of dollars from me. You committed fraud. You bought a condo for your mistress while I was trying to figure out how to pay for groceries. I was going to tell you." "When?" "After you'd moved everything offshore and left me with nothing." "That's not," he stopped, ran his hands over his face. "Claire, if you keep pushing this, I'm going to lose everything. My business. My reputation. The IRS is already breathing down my neck." "Good." "And if they press charges, I could go to prison star. Do you understand that? Prison." "I understand." He stared at me, and for the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. "So that's it. You want me in prison. I want you to face the consequences of what you did. If that means prison, so be it." "Jesus Christ, Claire, I'm not a monster." "You're a thief," I said, my voice rising. "You stole from me. You lied to me. You humiliated me. And you had the audacity to walk into that courtroom with your mistress and your mother and act like I was the problem. I didn't mean. Get off my porch, Graham.
Claire. Get off my porch.
He took a step back, his hands raised. Fine. Fine. But when this all blows up in your face, don't come crying to me. I slammed the door and locked it. Then I stood there, leaning against it, my heart hammering in my chest, and listened to his footsteps fade down the walkway. When I finally moved, I called Monica. He came here, I said, still breathless.
Graham.
Yes. He tried to get me to drop everything. Said he'd go to prison. Did he threaten you?
No.
He just begged. It was pathetic. Monica was quiet for a moment. Claire, I need you to listen to me very carefully. If he shows up again, do not engage. Call the police. Get a restraining order if you have to. Desperate men do dangerous things. You think he'd hurt me? I think he's watching everything he's built collapse, and I think he blames you for it. So yes, I think you should be careful. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Okay. And Claire? Document everything. If he texts you, if he calls, if he shows up again, save it all. We might need it.
I will.
After we hung up, I made myself another cup of coffee and sat down at my laptop. Graham had sent me 14 texts since I'd closed the door. I screenshot every single one. Asterisk, you're making a mistake. Asterisk. Asterisk, I never wanted it to come to this. Asterisk. Asterisk, please. Just talk to me. We can work this out. Asterisk. Asterisk, you're destroying me, Claire. Is that what you want? Asterisk. I saved them all to a folder labeled evidence, then blocked his number. And then I did something I hadn't done in months. I posted on social media. Not about Graham. Not about the divorce. Just a photo of my coffee cup on my kitchen table, the morning light streaming through the window, and a caption that said, asterisk starting fresh. Asterisk. Within an hour, I had 50 likes and a dozen supportive comments from people I hadn't talked to in years. And one comment that made me stop cold. It was from a woman named Jessica Pruitt. We'd gone to college together, lost touch after graduation, and I hadn't thought about her in a decade. Her comment said, asterisk, I'm so glad you're doing okay. After what he did, I wasn't sure you'd ever bounce back. If you need to talk, I'm here. Asterisk. Asterisk, after what he did. Asterisk. I clicked on her profile and sent her a direct message. Asterisk, hey, Jessica. Thanks for the support. What did you mean by after what he did? Asterisk. She responded within minutes. Asterisk, oh God, Claire. I thought you knew. About Natalie. Asterisk. My blood went cold. Asterisk, who's Natalie? Asterisk. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, asterisk, I think we should talk on the phone. Can I call you? Asterisk. I sent her my number. Jessica called 5 minutes later. Claire, she said, her voice tight with something between sympathy and urgency. I don't know how to say this, so I'm just going to say it. Graham didn't just cheat on you with Sienna. I sat down heavily. What? There was someone before her. A woman named Natalie Henderson. She worked at his firm about 7 years ago. They had an affair that lasted almost 2 years. 7 years ago. Right around the time I'd started noticing the distance between us. How do you know this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Because Natalie's my cousin. She told me everything when it ended. She was devastated. She thought Graham was going to leave you for her, but he just cut her off. Fired her. Paid her some kind of settlement to keep quiet. A settlement. Claire, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
There's more, Jessica said carefully. Natalie wasn't the only one. There was a woman before her, too. Someone named Amy. I don't know all the details, but, Claire, I think your husband has a pattern. I couldn't breathe. Why didn't you tell me? I finally managed. I didn't know you knew him. Not until I saw your engagement announcement, and by then you were already married. And I don't know, I thought maybe he'd changed. Maybe Natalie was a one-time thing. But when I heard about Sienna, she trailed off. I'm sorry. I should have said something years ago. It's not your fault, I said automatically. But my mind was racing. Graham hadn't just betrayed me once. He'd been doing it for *years*. Multiple women. Multiple affairs. And he'd covered them all up with money, with settlements, with his charm and his lies. I wasn't just his wife. I was his pattern. Jessica, I said slowly, do you think Natalie would be willing to talk to me? I can ask. Why? Because I need to know everything. Every detail. Every lie. If I'm going to take him down, I need to know exactly who I'm dealing with. Jessica was quiet for a moment. She's going to want something in return. Like what? Closure, maybe. Or justice. He hurt her, Claire. Really hurt her. And she never got the chance to make him pay for it. Tell her I'll give her both. Natalie Henderson agreed to meet me 2 days later at a coffee shop in uptown Charlotte. She was 34, with dark hair cut into a sleek bob and eyes that looked tired, like she'd spent years carrying something heavy. When I walked in, she was already sitting at a corner table, her hands wrapped around a ceramic mug. Natalie. She looked up, and I saw recognition flicker across her face. Claire. Hi. I sat down across from her. Thank you for meeting me. I wasn't sure I should, she admitted. But Jessica said you were trying to, I don't know, expose him. Something like that. She nodded slowly. Good. He deserves it. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I said, tell me everything. And she did. She told me about how Graham had hired her as a junior consultant when she was fresh out of grad school. How he'd been charming, attentive, supportive. How he'd stayed late to help her with projects, brought her coffee, made her feel seen. It started so slowly, she said, staring into her mug. A touch on the shoulder. A compliment. And then one night, we were working late, and he kissed me. And I didn't stop him. She told me about the affair. How Graham had promised to leave me, to build a life with her. How he'd taken her on trips, bought her gifts, made her believe she was special. And then one day, he just ended it, she said, her voice cracking. He called me into his office and told me it was over. That he'd made a mistake. That I needed to leave the company. Did he give you a reason? He said you were pregnant. I froze. What? He said you were pregnant, and he couldn't leave you. That he had to do the right thing. She looked at me, her eyes searching. Were you? No, I whispered. I was never pregnant. Natalie closed her eyes. Of course you weren't. He gave you a settlement. $50,000. In exchange for signing an NDA and never contacting him again. She laughed bitterly. I thought it was guilt money. Now I realize it was just another way to control the narrative. I reached across the table and took her hand. I'm going to make him pay for what he did to you. To both of us. She squeezed my hand back. How? I'm going to prove he's been doing this for years. That he's used company money to pay off women, to hide affairs, to cover his tracks. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows. Natalie's eyes filled with tears. Do you really think you can? I know I can. But I need your help. What do you need? Everything. The settlement agreement. Emails. Texts. Anything you have that proves what he did. She pulled out her phone. I kept it all. Every word. Every lie. I told myself it was for closure, but maybe it was for this. She forwarded me dozens of emails right there at the table. Messages from Graham, full of promises and lies. Photos of them together. Receipts for trips and dinners. And a scanned copy of the settlement agreement, with Graham's signature at the bottom. When she finished, she looked at me with something like hope. Do you think this will be enough? More than enough. That night, I sent everything to Monica. She called me at 11 p.m., her voice crackling with excitement. Claire, this is it. This is the smoking gun. You think? No star. If Graham's been using company funds to pay off women he had affairs with, that's not just fraud, that's a pattern of misconduct. And if we can prove he did it multiple times, we can argue that everything he's built is tainted. Every account, every asset, every penny. So what do? We file an emergency motion. We present this evidence to Judge Caulfield and we ask for an immediate injunction preventing Graham from accessing any of his assets until we can conduct a full forensic audit. Will it work? After the judge reads this, Claire, Graham's not just going to lose the money. He's going to lose everything. I should have felt triumphant. But all I felt was exhausted. Monica.
Yeah.
How did I miss this? How did I spend 11 years married to someone and not know who he really was? She was quiet for a long moment. Because he didn't want you to know. And because you loved him. That's not a weakness, Claire. That's just what love does. It makes us trust people. And sometimes those people don't deserve it. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Okay. Get some sleep. We've got a big day tomorrow. But I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Natalie. About Jessica's words. I think your husband has a pattern. And I thought about Sienna. Young, beautiful, starry-eyed Sienna, who probably thought she was special. Who probably thought Graham had chosen her because she was different, because she was worth leaving his wife for. She had no idea. She was just the latest in a long line of women Graham had used and discarded. And part of me, just a small part, felt sorry for her. Because when this was all over, when Graham's empire crumbled and the truth came out, Sienna was going to realize she'd been played just like the rest of us. The only difference was, she'd chosen to be complicit in destroying someone else's life to get what she wanted. And for that, I had no sympathy. If you're still with me, I need to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me what you think. Would you have done the same thing? Would you have fought back, or would you have walked away? And if you're finding this story as gripping as I hope you are, please subscribe. There are more stories like this waiting for you in the description box below. Stories about betrayal, revenge, and people who refuse to be broken. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Because this was just the beginning. The emergency motion hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a Wednesday. I woke up at 5:30, too anxious to sleep, and spent an hour getting ready. I wanted to look strong, composed, like someone who couldn't be broken, even after everything I'd been through. I chose a grey suit, professional, no nonsense, and pulled my hair back into a severe bun. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw someone I barely recognized anymore. Someone harder, sharper, someone who'd learned to fight. Monica picked me up at 7:30. She had 2 coffees in her cup holder and a determined look on her face. You ready? She asked as I buckled my seatbelt. I think so. Good. Because today's the day we bury him. The courthouse was already buzzing when we arrived. Word had gotten out, thanks to Graham's increasingly erratic behavior, that something big was happening in the Mitchell divorce case. I saw a few local reporters lingering near the entrance, and my stomach twisted. Don't engage with them, Monica warned. Let me handle any press. We pushed through the doors and made our way to the courtroom. And when we walked in, I saw something that made me stop dead. Graham was already there, sitting at his table. But he wasn't alone. Sienna was next to him, her hand on his arm, whispering something in his ear. And behind them, in the gallery, were at least a dozen people I'd never seen before. Colleagues from his firm, maybe. Or friends. People who'd come to watch the spectacle. And then I saw her. Diane. She was sitting in the front row, her arms crossed, her face set in a mask of cold fury. When she saw me, her lip curled. I looked away. Monica and I took our seats, and she immediately started pulling documents out of her briefcase. They brought reinforcements, she muttered. That's fine. Let them watch. A few minutes later, Judge Caulfield entered. All rise. We stood. He sat, adjusted his glasses, and looked at Monica. Ms. Reeves, you called this hearing. Let's hear it. Monica stood, and her voice was steady and strong. Your Honor, we've uncovered additional evidence that dramatically changes the scope of this case. Over the past 2 weeks, my client has been contacted by multiple women who had affairs with Mr. Mitchell during his marriage to Ms. Mitchell. A ripple of murmurs went through the courtroom. Graham's face went white. These women have provided documentation showing that Mr. Mitchell engaged in a pattern of extramarital affairs spanning nearly a decade. And in at least 2 cases, he used company funds to pay settlements to these women in exchange for their silence. Richard Novak shot to his feet. Your Honor, this is completely... Sit down, Mr. Novak, Judge Caulfield said, his eyes on Monica. Continue. Monica pulled out a folder. We have emails, text messages, settlement agreements, and bank records showing that Mr. Mitchell transferred a total of $125,000 to 2 different women over the course of his marriage. These payments were disguised as business expenses and written off on his tax returns. She walked the folder up to the bench and handed it to the judge. Additionally, we've identified multiple offshore accounts that were funded with marital assets and used to support Mr. Mitchell's lifestyle with his various paramours. We're requesting an immediate forensic audit of all of Mr. Mitchell's financial holdings, as well as an expanded asset freeze to include any accounts we haven't yet identified. Judge Caulfield opened the folder and started reading. The room was dead silent. I could hear my own heartbeat. I could hear someone in the gallery shifting in their seat. I could hear Graham's ragged breathing from across the aisle. And then Judge Caulfield looked up. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, anger, maybe, or disgust, that made my pulse quicken. Mr. Novak, he said, his voice low and measured, does your client have a response to these allegations? Richard stood slowly. He looked like a man who knew he was about to lose. Your Honor, my client denies any wrongdoing. These accusations are based on hearsay and... They're based on signed settlement agreements, Monica interjected. With your client's signature. And bank records showing the transfers.
Your Honor.
Mr. Novak, I've seen enough. Judge Caulfield set the folder down and leaned forward. I'm granting Ms. Reeves' motion for a forensic audit. I'm also expanding the asset freeze to include any and all accounts, properties, or holdings associated with Mr. Mitchell, regardless of when they were acquired or whose name they are in. Graham made a choked sound. Furthermore, the judge continued, I'm referring this case to the State Bar for review. If Mr. Mitchell has been using his business to commit fraud, then his professional conduct needs to be examined. Richard's face went grey.
Your Honor, that's
appropriate, Judge Caulfield said sharply. Your client has engaged in a decade-long pattern of deception, fraud, and misconduct. And I will not allow him to continue profiting from it. He looked at Graham, and his voice dropped to something cold and cutting. Mr. Mitchell, I don't know what you thought you were going to accomplish by hiding assets and paying off your mistresses. But I can tell you this, it didn't work. And by the time we're done here, you're going to wish you'd been honest from the start. Graham just sat there, his face blank, like he couldn't process what was happening. We'll reconvene in 30 days for a status update on the audit, Judge Caulfield said. Until then, Mr. Mitchell, You are prohibited from making any financial transactions without prior approval from this court.
Are we clear?
Graham didn't answer.
Mr. Mitchell, are we clear?
Yes, he whispered.
Good. We're adjourned.
The gavel came down. The courtroom erupted. People in the gallery started whispering, reporters scrambled to take notes, and Diane pushed her way through the crowd toward Graham. Sienna was crying, actually crying, her hands covering her face.
And me.
I just sat there, letting it all wash over me. Monica put a hand on my shoulder.
You did it.
We did it, I corrected.
No, Claire.
You did this. You had the courage to fight back.
And you won.
I looked over at Graham. He was slumped in his chair, his head in his hands, while Richard spoke urgently to him. Diane was standing over him, her face twisted with rage, saying something I couldn't hear. And then Graham looked up. Our eyes met. And in that moment, I saw everything. The anger, the humiliation, the realization that he'd lost. That I'd beaten him. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just looked at him, steady and unflinching, and then I stood up and walked out. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us.
Ms. Mitchell.
Ms. Mitchell, do you have a comment? Can you tell us about the offshore accounts? Is it true your husband paid off multiple women? Monica stepped in front of me. My client has no comment at this time. Please respect her privacy. We pushed through the crowd and made it to Monica's car. Once we were inside, she locked the doors and let out a long breath. Holy shit, she said. I laughed, a strange, breathless sound that didn't feel like it came from me. Did that really just happen? It really just happened. Graham's going to lose everything.
Yes, he is.
I leaned back in my seat and closed my eyes. I thought I'd feel different. How do you feel? Tired, I admitted. And relieved, I think. But also sad. Not for him. For me. For the person I used to be, before all of this. Monica reached over and squeezed my hand. That person's still there, Claire. She's just stronger now. That night, my phone started blowing up. Friends I hadn't talked to in years were reaching out. My mom called 3 times. Even my brother, who lived in California and barely kept in touch, sent me a text that said, heard what happened. Proud of you. But there was one message that caught my attention. It was from an unknown number. You think you've won, but this isn't over. You've destroyed everything, and you're going to regret it. I stared at the message for a long moment, then forwarded it to Monica with a note, guessing this is either Graham or Sienna. Thoughts? She called me immediately. Don't respond. Save it. If they keep harassing you, we'll get a restraining order. Do you think they'd actually do something? I think they're desperate. And desperate people are unpredictable. Just be careful, okay?
I will.
After we hung up, I blocked the number. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over.
Not yet.
3 days later, I got another call from Monica. Claire, you need to see this.
See what?
Graham's business partner, Derek Chen, just came forward. He's offering to testify against Graham. I sat up straighter.
Why?
Because apparently, Graham's been embezzling from the business. Derek suspected something was off, but he didn't have proof. Now that everything's coming out, he wants to cooperate with the investigation. And he's willing to provide documents showing exactly how much Graham stole, not just from you, but from the business itself. How much are we talking about? Over $1 million. I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. $1 million.
Yeah.
Graham's been siphoning money out of the firm for years, covering it up with fake invoices and creative accounting. Derek's been going through the books, and has found discrepancies going back almost a decade.
Oh my God.
Claire, this is huge. If we can prove Graham stole from his own business, we can go after all of his assets. The offshore accounts, the properties, everything. Because technically, none of it was ever his to begin with. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. There's more, Monica said. Derek's also willing to testify that Graham used company funds to pay for his affairs. Dinners, trips, gifts, all of it. He kept detailed records because he was worried the IRS would come after him too. So what happens now? We take all of this to Judge Caulfield. We show him that Graham isn't just a cheating husband, he's a criminal. And we make sure he pays for every single thing he's done. The final hearing was set for 6 weeks later. 6 weeks of waiting, of preparing, of living in a strange limbo where I didn't know if I was winning or losing, if this nightmare was ending or just beginning. But during those 6 weeks, something shifted. I stopped checking my phone obsessively for messages from Graham. I stopped lying awake at night replaying our marriage, looking for the moment where everything went wrong. I stopped trying to make sense of how someone could lie for that long, could betray that completely. Instead, I started rebuilding. I went back to therapy, something I'd stopped when Graham and I got married because he'd said it was unnecessary. I reconnected with friends I'd let drift away over the years. I started running again, something I used to love before life got in the way. And slowly, gradually, I started to feel like myself again. Not the woman I'd been before Graham. Someone new. Someone who'd been broken and put herself back together, and who knew exactly how strong she was because she'd tested it. Monica checked in with me regularly. The forensic audit was progressing, and every week brought new revelations. More hidden accounts. More forged documents. More evidence of just how deep Graham's deception ran. It's like peeling an onion, Monica said during one of our meetings. Every layer we uncover, there's another one underneath. Derek Chen had turned out to be an invaluable ally. He'd provided thousands of pages of documentation showing Graham's theft from the business, his manipulation of the books, his systematic fraud. And he'd agreed to testify, despite knowing it would likely mean the end of Mitchell and Associates. Why is he doing this? I'd asked Monica. Doesn't this hurt him too? He says it's the right thing to do, she'd replied. And honestly, I think he's just tired of covering for Graham. Tired of being complicit in something he knew was wrong. The IRS investigation was moving forward as well. Agent Walsh called me twice for follow-up questions, and each time, his tone suggested they were building a strong case. And through it all, Graham stayed silent. No more texts. No more late-night visits. No more desperate pleas. It was like he'd disappeared. But I knew better. I knew he was out there, plotting, planning, trying to figure out how to save himself. And I was ready for whatever he tried next. The morning of the final hearing, I woke up feeling strangely calm. I'd expected to be nervous, anxious, maybe even afraid. But instead, I just felt ready. I put on a black suit, simple, professional, powerful, and looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked nothing like the person who'd walked into that courthouse 6 months ago. That woman had been scared, uncertain, barely holding herself together. This woman was a fighter. Monica picked me up at 8. Big day, she said as I climbed into her car.
I know. You ready?
More than ready. We drove to the courthouse in comfortable silence. When we arrived, the parking lot was already full. Word had spread about the case, about the hidden millions, the affairs, the fraud, and it had become something of a spectacle. Inside, the courtroom was packed. I saw reporters, colleagues from Graham's firm, people I didn't recognize. And sitting in the front row of the gallery was Natalie Henderson. When she saw me, she gave me a small nod. I nodded back. Monica and I took our seats at our table. A few minutes later, Graham and Richard entered. Graham looked terrible. He'd lost weight, his suit hung loose on his frame, and his eyes were hollow. He didn't look at me as he sat down. But I looked at him, and I felt nothing but pity. Not for what he was going through, he'd earned every bit of it, but for who he'd become. For the person who'd chosen lies over truth, who'd chosen greed over love, who destroyed everything good in his life because he couldn't stop chasing more. Judge Caulfield entered, and we all stood. "Be seated," he said, taking his place at the bench. He had a stack of folders in front of him, thicker than before, weighted with months of investigation. He looked at both tables, then settled his gaze on Graham. "Mr. Mitchell, I've spent the last 6 weeks reviewing the forensic audit of your finances, the testimony from your business partner, and the evidence submitted by your wife's counsel. And I have to say, in my 23 years on the bench, I have never seen a case quite like this." Graham's hands were shaking on the table. "The audit revealed that you concealed approximately $4.2 million in assets from your wife. You established offshore accounts, purchased properties under shell companies, and systematically diverted funds from both marital accounts and your business. You paid settlements to multiple women to keep your affairs secret, and you used company money to fund your extramarital activities." Judge Caulfield paused, letting that sink in. "Furthermore, the evidence shows that you engaged in tax fraud, embezzlement, and potentially money laundering. The IRS is pursuing criminal charges, and the State Bar is reviewing your professional conduct." Richard stood. "Your Honor, my client would like to—" "I'm not finished, Mr. Novak." Richard Saturday. Judge Caulfield turned to me. "Ms. Mitchell, your husband took advantage of your trust, your work, and your commitment to your marriage. He built his empire on your labor and then tried to cut you out of it entirely. That stops today." He opened one of the folders and pulled out a document. "I'm awarding Ms. Mitchell 65% of all marital assets, including the business, the properties, and the offshore accounts. Given the extent of Mr. Mitchell's fraud and the fact that much of this wealth was built on her unpaid labor and his illegal activities, I find this division to be more than fair." I heard someone gasp in the gallery, maybe Diane, maybe Sienna. "Additionally, I'm ordering Mr. Mitchell to pay Ms. Mitchell's legal fees in full, as well as compensatory damages in the amount of $500,000 for emotional distress." Graham's head dropped into his hands. "Mr. Mitchell will retain 35% of the marital assets, which, given the circumstances, is generous. However, those assets are subject to seizure by the IRS and other authorities as part of their ongoing investigations." Judge Caulfield set the document down and looked directly at Graham. "Mr. Mitchell, you came into my courtroom 6 months ago acting like you'd already won. Like your wife was an inconvenience to be dealt with, rather than a partner you'd promised to honor. You underestimated her, and you paid the price." He picked up his gavel. "This marriage is dissolved. All terms are effective immediately. We're adjourned." The gavel came down. And just like that, it was over. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions. Graham sat frozen at his table, not moving, not speaking. Diane pushed through the crowd, her face red with rage, screaming something about appeals and injustice. But I didn't hear any of it. Because Monica was hugging me, and I was crying, not sad tears, not angry tears, but tears of pure, overwhelming relief. "You did it," she kept saying. "Claire, you did it." "We did it," I managed between sobs. When I finally pulled away, I saw Natalie making her way toward me. She stopped a few feet away, her eyes wet. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For finishing what I couldn't start. For making him answer for what he did." I reached out and hugged her. "Thank you for having the courage to come forward." When we separated, she smiled, a real smile, the first I'd seen from her. "Good luck, Claire. You deserve every bit of happiness that's coming your way." Outside the courthouse, Monica and I stood on the steps, watching the chaos unfold below. "What are you going to do now?" she asked. I thought about it. About the money, the house, the life I'd have to rebuild from scratch. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I know I'm going to be okay." More than okay, Monica said. You're going to be great. I believed her. We stood there for a few more minutes, letting the moment settle over us. And then my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Asterisk, this isn't over. Asterisk. I showed it to Monica. She sighed. I'll file for the restraining order first thing tomorrow. Do you think it's Graham? Probably. Or Sienna. Or Diane. Does it matter? I thought about it, then shook my head. No, it doesn't. Because the truth was, they didn't matter anymore. Graham didn't matter. The hate, the threats, the desperate attempts to regain control, none of it mattered. I'd won. Not just the case, but myself. My dignity. My future. And no one could take that away from me. That night, I sat in my kitchen, my kitchen, truly mine now, and opened a bottle of champagne. I poured myself a glass, raised it to the empty room, and said out loud, to new beginnings. Then I drank it down, smiled, and got to work planning the rest of my life. The weeks following the final hearing were surreal. There was so much to do, paperwork to sign, accounts to close, assets to transfer, that I barely had time to process what had actually happened. Monica guided me through it all, patient and methodical, making sure every detail was handled correctly. The house was officially mine. Graham had 30 days to remove any remaining personal belongings, and he came by one Saturday morning with a moving truck and two guys who wouldn't make eye contact with me. I watched from the living room window as they loaded boxes into the truck, and when Graham finally drove away, I felt a weight lift that I didn't even know I'd been carrying. The business was more complicated. Derek Chen and I worked out an agreement where I would sell my share back to him for a fair price. I didn't want any part of Mitchell & Associates, didn't want my name attached to something Graham had built on lies. Derek understood. The sale went through within a month, and suddenly I had more money in my bank account than I'd ever seen in my life. The offshore accounts took longer. There were lawyers in 3 different countries involved, legal proceedings that dragged on for months. But eventually, every account was traced, every asset identified, and I received what I was owed. 65% of $4.2 million, plus the $500,000 in damages, plus the proceeds from selling my share of the business. I did the math one night, sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop open, and stared at the number until it stopped feeling real. $3.8 million. More than enough to live on for the rest of my life. More than enough to never worry about money again. And every penny of it had been earned through pain, betrayal, and the hardest fight of my life. The criminal investigations took longer. Agent Walsh called me periodically with updates. The IRS had built a comprehensive case against Graham for tax fraud, and the district attorney was considering additional charges for embezzlement and money laundering. It's going to take time, Walsh told me during one call. These cases always do. But we've got him, Ms. Mitchell. He's going to pay for what he did. Graham ended up pleading guilty to 3 counts of tax fraud and 1 count of embezzlement as part of a plea deal. He was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison, though his lawyers were already working on appeals. For years felt like both too much and not enough. But it was justice. Real, tangible justice. And that mattered. Sienna disappeared after the hearing. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd moved back to her hometown in South Carolina, that she'd left Charlotte in disgrace after the full extent of Graham's crimes became public. Her involvement, the affair, the condo he'd bought her, the trips he'd funded with stolen money, had been splashed across local news sites and gossip columns for weeks. Part of me felt sorry for her. She'd been young and stupid, convinced she was special, not realizing she was just another name on a very long list. But then I'd remember the way she'd smiled in that courtroom, the way she'd said, "That's right, darling," while Graham tried to humiliate me, and the sympathy would evaporate. She'd made her choices. Now she had to live with them. Diane was a different story. She never apologized, never reached out, never acknowledged that her precious son had done anything wrong. As far as she was concerned, I was still the villain in this story, the bitter ex-wife who destroyed a good man out of spite. I heard through the grapevine that she'd mortgaged her house to help pay Graham's legal fees. That she visited him in prison every week. That she was still telling anyone who'd listen that Graham had been railroaded by a vindictive woman and a corrupt system. I felt sorry for her, in a way. She'd spent her whole life building Graham up, telling him he could do no wrong, shielding him from consequences. And now she was watching everything crumble, unable to accept that maybe, just maybe, she created the monster who destroyed so many lives. But that wasn't my problem anymore. 6 months after the final hearing, I did something I'd been thinking about for a long time. I sold the house. It was too big for just me, too full of memories I didn't want anymore. Every room reminded me of who I'd been when I lived there, the woman who tried so hard to be enough, who'd bent herself into shapes that didn't fit just to keep a man who'd never loved her the way she deserved. I didn't want to be that woman anymore. So I put it on the market, and it sold within 3 weeks to a young couple expecting their first baby. When I handed them the keys, the woman, Sarah, her name was, looked around the living room with stars in her eyes and said, "We're going to be so happy here." I hoped they would be. I moved into a smaller place across town, a 2-bedroom condo with big windows and a balcony that overlooked the city. It was modern, clean, completely mine. No history. No ghosts. Just possibility. I furnished it slowly, carefully, choosing pieces that made me happy instead of pieces that would impress visitors. I painted the walls colors Graham would have hated, deep teal in the bedroom, warm yellow in the kitchen. I hung artwork I'd always loved but never bought because it wasn't sophisticated enough. And slowly, room by room, I built a life that was entirely my own. Around this time, something unexpected happened. I got a message on LinkedIn from a woman named Patricia Vance. She was a divorce attorney in Atlanta, and she'd been following my case. Ms. Mitchell, she wrote, I know this is unusual, but I wanted to reach out. I represent women going through high-asset divorces, many of whom are being taken advantage of by spouses who hide money and manipulate the system. Your case has become something of a blueprint for how to fight back. Would you ever consider speaking with some of my clients? Not as legal advice, obviously, but just to share your experience. I think it would mean a lot to them to hear from someone who's been through it and came out the other side. I stared at the message for a long time. The idea of talking about what I'd been through, of reliving it, even in the service of helping others, made my stomach clench. But I also remembered how alone I'd felt at the beginning. How powerless. How convinced I was that there was no way to win against someone like Graham. And I thought about Natalie, and all the other women Graham had hurt over the years. Women who'd never gotten justice because they didn't know how to fight back. I wrote back, I'd be willing to talk. When were you thinking? That first conversation turned into something bigger. Patricia introduced me to 3 of her clients, women whose husbands were hiding assets, committing fraud, trying to leave them with nothing. I met with each of them individually, in quiet coffee shops or over Zoom calls, and I told them my story. Not the sanitized version. Not the everything worked out fine version. The real version. The one where I was terrified and heartbroken and spent weeks crying in my car because I didn't know if I had the strength to keep going. The one where I almost gave up a dozen times because fighting was so much harder than just accepting defeat. But I also told them how it felt to stand in that courtroom and watch the judge read my letter. How it felt to see Graham's face when he realized he'd lost. How it felt to finally take back control of my own life. And every single one of them cried. Not because they were sad. Because they were relieved. Because someone understood. Because they weren't alone. One woman, her name was Rebecca, grabbed my hand after we finished talking and said, "You saved me. You don't even know it, but you just saved me." I was ready to give up. To just sign whatever he wanted and walk away with nothing. But now I know I can fight. And I'm going to. I cried all the way home that day. Because I realized something. What Graham did to me was terrible. Unforgivable. It had nearly destroyed me. But it had also made me into someone who could help others. Someone who understood what it meant to be underestimated, betrayed, discarded, and to fight back anyway. And maybe that was the real revenge. Not the money. Not the prison sentence. Not even the satisfaction of watching Graham lose everything. The real revenge was becoming the person he never thought I could be. A year after the final hearing, I got a letter. It was addressed to me, care of Monica's law office, and the return address was a federal correctional facility in Kentucky. It was from Graham. I held the envelope for a long time, debating whether to open it. Part of me wanted to throw it away, to refuse to give him even one more second of my attention. But curiosity won out. I opened it carefully, unfolding the single page inside. The letter was short. Just a few paragraphs in Graham's familiar handwriting, neat and precise, the same handwriting that used to appear on birthday cards and grocery lists and love notes tucked into my lunch bag. Claire, I don't know if you'll read this. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. But I had to write it anyway. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean anything now, after everything I did. But I need you to know that I am sorry for lying. Sorry for stealing. Sorry for making you feel like you weren't enough, when the truth is you were always too good for me. I've had a lot of time to think in here. About who I was. About what I did. About why I kept making the same mistakes over and over, even when I knew they were destroying everything. I don't have a good answer. I was selfish. Arrogant. Convinced that I deserved more than what I had, and too stupid to realize that what I had was everything. You were right about me. About all of it. And I'm sorry it took losing everything for me to see that. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to respond to this. But I wanted you to know that you were right to fight back. You deserved better than what I gave you. You deserved honesty and respect and love, and I failed you in every possible way. I hope you're happy, Claire. I really do. Graham. I read it 3 times. And then I folded it up, put it back in the envelope, and filed it away in a drawer. Not because I believed him. Not because his apology changed anything. But because it was proof. Proof that I'd won. Proof that he finally understood what he'd lost. Proof that I'd been right all along. 2 years after the divorce was finalized, I went on my first date. His name was Marcus, and he was a teacher at a local high school. We met at a bookstore. I was browsing the memoir section, and he made a joke about the self-help book I was holding. We started talking, and 3 hours later, we were still standing in the same aisle, surrounded by books we'd pulled off the shelves to show each other. He asked for my number. I gave it to him. We went to dinner the next week. Then coffee. Then a movie. And slowly, carefully, I let myself start to trust again. It wasn't easy. I was guarded in ways I'd never been before, always watching for red flags, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. But Marcus was patient. He didn't push. He just showed up. Consistently. Honestly. And eventually, I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, not everyone was like Graham. We took things slow. We didn't rush. And when he told me he loved me, 8 months into dating, I actually believed him. Because this time, I knew what real love looked like. And it looked nothing like what I'd had before. 3 years after the final hearing, I did something I never thought I'd do. I started a non-profit. It was called Second Chapter, and its mission was simple: to help women going through high-conflict divorces access the legal and financial resources they needed to fight back. We provided funding for forensic accountants, connected women with experienced attorneys, and offered workshops on financial literacy and self-advocacy. Patricia Vance was one of our first board members. Natalie Henderson volunteered as a peer mentor. And Monica served as our legal advisor. We started small, just a handful of cases, operating out of a rented office space in downtown Charlotte. But word spread. Women reached out from across the state, then across the country, desperate for help navigating divorces where their spouses were hiding money, manipulating the system, trying to leave them with nothing. And we helped them. Every single one. Some of them won big, like I did. Others just got what they were owed, no more, no less. But all of them got the chance to fight, to stand up for themselves, to refuse to be erased. And that made every late night, every fundraising event, every exhausting day worth it. 5 years after the divorce, I ran into Graham. It was completely by accident. I was at a coffee shop near my office, waiting in line, when I heard a voice behind me.
Claire.
I turned. He was thinner than I remembered. Older. His hair was almost entirely grey now, and there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. He was wearing jeans and a plain t-shirt, nothing like the expensive suits he used to favor. Graham, I said, keeping my voice neutral. I didn't expect to see you here.
I work nearby.
Right.
Yeah.
He shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. How have you been?
Good.
Really good, actually. That's great. I'm glad. We stood there in awkward silence for a moment. Then he said, I heard about your non-profit. Second chapter. That's really something, Claire. Thank you. I mean it. What you're doing, helping people, it's incredible. I always knew you were capable of great things. I just wish I'd. He trailed off, shaking his head. Never mind. I don't have the right to say that. No, I agreed. You don't. The barista called my name. I grabbed my coffee and turned back to Graham. Take care of yourself, I said. And then I walked out. I didn't look back. Now, 6 years later, I'm sitting on my balcony watching the sunset over Charlotte, a glass of wine in my hand, and I'm thinking about everything that's happened. The betrayal. The fight. The victory. The aftermath. All of it. And I realized something. I wouldn't change any of it. Not because I enjoyed the pain. I didn't. Not because I'm glad Graham betrayed me. I'm not. But because that pain, that fight, that moment where I had to decide whether to give up or keep fighting, it made me who I am now. Someone stronger, braver, more resilient than I ever knew I could be. Someone who knows her worth and refuses to settle for anything less. Someone who helps other women find that same strength in themselves. Graham thought he could break me. He thought he could take everything I'd worked for and leave me with nothing. He was wrong. I didn't just survive what he did to me. I *thrived star. And that is the best revenge of all. If you've made it this far, thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing that people can fight back, can rebuild, can become something more than their worst moments. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Tell me your story, if you're brave enough to share it. And if you found something valuable in my journey, please hit that subscribe button. Check the description box below for more stories like this. Stories about resilience, revenge, and refusing to be broken. Because here's what I've learned. You're stronger than you think. Braver than you know. And capable of so much more than anyone who's ever underestimated you could imagine. Don't let anyone make you believe otherwise. Not ever.